I never thought I'd be the kind of person who gets haunted by the past. My life is normal, comfortable, married for 11 years to a woman I loved, or at least someone I've built a life with. Someone who makes me laugh, challenges me, and accepts me in ways I didn't know I needed. And yet, here I am, 36, thinking about a girl I dated for 1 month, 16 years ago, just a month, but somehow, she has been invading my mind relentlessly. It started innocently enough. I had a dream, the kind that feels unreal while it's happening, but once you wake up, lingers like smoke in your chest. In the dream, I called her the one that got away, and I woke up with that phrase stuck in my head, repeating itself over and over like some mantra I didn't ask for. The strange thing is, it's not true. She isn't the one that got away. She isn't a soulmate waiting in some alternate timeline. We broke up 16 years ago, and as far as I know, our lives went in completely different directions. We never stayed in touch. No social media, no contact, nothing, and yet, suddenly, I can't stop thinking about those few weeks when I was 20. Those weeks feel bigger than life now, almost mythic in my mind. Every detail comes back vividly. The way her laugh sounded when she found something ridiculous funny. The soft curve of her hair as it fell across her shoulder. The way she smelled after she'd been outside for a few minutes. The way the world felt like it was just ours when we were together. I remember the breakup. I remember how abrupt it was. One weekend, we were hanging out with friends, laughing, joking, feeling invincible. Sunday, we went to a friend's college graduation party. And something in her changed. She seemed distant, distracted, almost gone. And then she left. That was it. No explanations. No arguments. Just gone. I took it hard. Too hard, maybe. I called off work for 3 days. I drank too much, cried too much. I couldn't understand why something so fleeting, something that felt like nothing at the time, that could hurt so much. My friends tried to console me, but I think they were mostly just confused by how devastated I was. Fast forward 16 years, and I've built a life. I'm happily married, or at least, I think I am. I've built a career. I've bought a house. I've shared life with someone who is reliable, thoughtful, and, most importantly, committed. And yet, all of that feels fragile, because my mind keeps drifting back to her. I don't know why now. Maybe it's a subconscious longing for youth, for freedom, for the life I didn't know how to live. Maybe it's unresolved grief, closure. Perhaps. I don't even know if closure was ever possible. The breakup was abrupt, and neither of us ever said goodbye properly. The hardest part is the guilt. Thinking about her makes me feel like a terrible husband. Like I'm betraying the life I've built with my wife. Even if all of this exists only in my head, I try to push the thoughts away, but they sneak in at night. In the quiet moments when no one can see me, I've read some self-help articles. They all say the same thing: this is normal. It's nostalgia, a longing for a chapter that ended abruptly. Closure, they say, is often a personal journey. Not something that comes from the other person, but knowing that doesn't make it hurt any less. Sometimes I imagine seeing her again, just passing her on the street, exchanging a look, and then moving on, but I don't want to see her. I don't want to risk opening a wound that could swallow the life I've built, and yet, my mind doesn't care about logic or reason. It keeps replaying those 4 or 5 weeks as though they were some magical, perfect time frozen in amber. I haven't told my wife. How could I? The words feel like poison. Like they would undo everything we've built. How do you say, I keep thinking about a girl I dated for 1 month 16 years ago without causing unnecessary hurt? And even if I did, what would she say? It's okay, I understand. Or you need to figure this out. I don't even know if I want to tell her. I think part of me wants to solve this internally, wrestle with it myself, and somehow emerge without losing what I have now, but the obsession is relentless. I catch myself rehashing the smallest details: her smile, her laugh, the way she left that day. It's almost like a ghost I can't exorcise, and the more I think about it, the more I feel trapped between who I was and who I am now. I know it's irrational. I know the girl from 16 years ago isn't important in any real sense. She is a memory, a symbol, a fragment of youth that my brain refuses to let go of. And yet, Every time I try to focus on my life now, she slips in. It's maddening. I don't know what to do. Should I tell my wife? Should I confront the memory in some active way? Write it down? Or try to reach out to the past to get closure? Or should I simply ride it out? Endure the mental tug-of-war until my brain tires and releases her. I feel like a fool as someone who should be satisfied, grounded, present. And yet here I am, stuck in a liminal space between past and present, wondering why a fleeting relationship from my early 20s continues to haunt me. It's strange how the mind works. I can remember her laugh in perfect detail, the exact way she tilted her head when she smiled, and the scent of her shampoo lingering after she left my apartment. But I can't remember the mundane details like what she actually studied in college, or what her favorite color was. It's as if memory picks and chooses the fragments it wants, exaggerating the significance of things that were, in reality, insignificant. And yet, every fragment hits me like a bullet. I can feel the weight of her absence as if it were a tangible thing pressing on my chest. I've caught myself daydreaming at work. Not overtly, of course. No one notices. But in those quiet moments when my mind wanders, I imagine her smiling at me across a coffee shop table, or running into her on a city street. My brain embellishes the past, reconstructing a version of her that never truly existed. And then, I feel a strange combination of longing and guilt. The guilt is heavier than anything. I love my wife. I truly do. And yet, the fact that my mind keeps returning to a fleeting relationship from 16 years ago makes me feel like a fraud. I wonder if I'm a terrible person for being unable to fully inhabit the life I've built. I know she doesn't deserve to be in competition with a memory. Yet here I am, giving that memory more space than it deserves. Last night, I found myself awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, imagining how different life might have been if that 1 month had continued. It's a pointless exercise, of course. Life has moved on. She probably has no idea who I am anymore, and if she does, it's likely only in the vaguest sense. And yet, I can't stop constructing alternate timelines in my head, imagining conversations that never happened, moments that never existed. I wonder if this is some kind of subconscious nostalgia for youth itself. At 20, life seemed wide open, filled with endless possibility. I didn't have the responsibilities, the mortgage, the bills, the career pressures. Perhaps my brain has attached those feelings of freedom and possibility to her image, making her a symbol of a time when life felt magical and simple. But the guilt comes rushing back whenever I think about her in comparison to my wife. My wife, who has been my partner, my confidant, my anchor for more than a decade. My wife, who has shared so much of herself with me, trusted me, and relied on me. And yet, a fleeting memory keeps intruding, unbidden, uninvited. I feel selfish, weak, and unworthy of the life I've built. I've tried to reason with myself. I tell myself, it's just memory. It's not real. It's not love. I've read articles, talked to therapists in theory, and tried to understand that what I'm experiencing is normal, the brain's way of processing unresolved feelings. They all say it's about closure, that some fragment of my past hasn't been reconciled. And yet, the knowledge doesn't quiet the obsession. It only sharpens the feeling that I'm divided, existing simultaneously into timelines, one of reality and one of longing. Sometimes I catch myself speaking aloud to no one, repeating her name or murmuring lines from conversations we had 16 years ago. It feels absurd, and yet there's a compulsion I can't fight. I think about how differently I would act now, how I would avoid the mistakes I made, how I might even recognize the abruptness of our breakup and try to understand it instead of spiraling. But that version of me doesn't exist anymore. The only version left is the one trapped in memory, replaying fragments that my mind insists are more significant than they really were. I think about talking to my wife. The thought terrifies me. How do you say? I keep thinking about a girl I dated for a month 16 years ago. It feels reckless, like opening a door that can never be closed. She would be hurt, and rightfully so. It's not about betrayal, not really, but I can already see the doubt that would creep in, the insecurity, the questions. And yet, the alternative is keeping it all inside, letting it fester like some silent and spoken truth that I can't escape. I try to write, to journal, to map my thoughts and feelings, hoping that putting them on paper will release them from my mind. But every sentence leads to another memory, Every memory leads to another question. And every question loops back to the same gnawing unease. And here I am caught between what was, what is, and what could never be. My brain refuses to let go of her, my heart feels divided, and my conscience is racked with guilt. I know it's irrational. I know the past is gone. I know my life now is full of love, stability, and depth that she could never replace. And yet, the obsession persists, like a ghost that refuses to rest. Some days, it's worse than others. I'll be at work, in a meeting or typing emails, and suddenly she's there, her laugh echoing in my mind. The memory of her hand brushing mine on some meaningless afternoon. Or the way she looked at me when I said something stupid. It's like my brain hijacks the present, transporting me back 16 years in a split second. I hate that I feel this way. Hate it. I look at my wife and feel a deep, gnawing guilt. She's kind, loving, patient, everything a partner should be, and here I am, preoccupied with someone I haven't seen in over a decade and a half. I know it's not fair to her. I try to remind myself that my mind isn't rational, that nostalgia is a natural human experience. But rational thought does nothing to ease the tension. At night, I lie awake and go over the what-ifs in painstaking detail. What if I had called her that Sunday, trying to understand why she left? What if I had said the right words, made the right gesture, convinced her to stay? My mind manufactures conversations, apologies, explanations, none of which exist in reality. I think about how brief it all was. 1 month, a month. And yet it consumes me. I replay her smile, her voice, the feel of her against me. Every memory is sharper than it should be. Every emotion more vivid, more intoxicating, and more painful. Sometimes I wonder if this is a symptom of some unresolved emotional wound from youth, the way a heartbreak can carve a groove into your psyche that echoes decades later. Or maybe it's just the human tendency to romanticize the past, to glorify a fleeting connection because it represents a time of freedom, naivety, and possibility. I've tried to distract myself. I've thrown myself into work, into hobbies, into friends, and yet the thoughts persist. They're not constant, but they're relentless enough to undermine my sense of self, my sense of reality. I feel guilty for thinking about her, ashamed that my mind refuses to settle into the life I've built. I've even considered therapy. Not because my marriage is in trouble, but because I feel like I'm losing control over my own thoughts. I want to understand why she has this power over me, why I can't release the memory, why a brief encounter from 16 years ago feels like a ghost pressing against the walls of my mind. And the guilt, it's suffocating. Every time I see my wife laughing at something I said, I feel a pang of guilt for imagining another woman's laughter, for mentally comparing her to my wife, for the inevitable conclusion that no matter how much I love my wife, a memory from youth still claws at me. I haven't told anyone, not my wife, not my friends, not even myself out loud. It feels like admitting it would make it real, give it a weight I'm not sure I could carry. Yet keeping it bottled up makes it worse. The obsession grows in silence, festering, reminding me of a time I can't reclaim but that refuses to release me. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch myself asking a dangerous question. What if I hadn't stopped thinking about her all these years? What if the brief encounter had been allowed to continue, grow, and become something lasting? It's a fantasy, I know, impossible, implausible, and probably undesirable, yet it haunts me more than reality ever could. At night, I write in my journal, trying to contain the memories, the guilt, the longing. I write to release them, to see them in black and white, hoping that confronting them head-on will ease the hold they have over me. But often, the act of writing only strengthens them, giving them a permanence that reality never afforded. I know I can't live like this forever. I can't exist in a state of nostalgia and guilt, clinging to a ghost while standing in a life I'm grateful for. But I also can't stop the mental replay, the constant mental cinema that keeps her alive in a way that my wife never could, not because of comparison, but because of time and memory and the way the mind holds onto unfinished business. So I exist in this liminal space, caught between past and present, longing and guilt, reality and memory. Each day, I try to live fully, to immerse myself in my life, to honor my marriage. And yet, at random moments, I'm yanked back to that 1 month, 16 years ago, with a girl whose name I barely even remember spelling, whose life I don't know, who doesn't even exist in my present. And yet, who is impossible to forget. Asterisk I've started noticing patterns. The thoughts always come at night, when the world quiets down, when there's nothing to distract me from my own mind. It's like the day builds walls around her memory, work, obligations, small tasks, and when the walls crumble, she rushes in, uninvited and unrelenting. I've tried reasoning with myself. I tell myself she's irrelevant. She's a memory, a one-month fragment of life, long past, with no bearing on the present. But reasoning doesn't stop the emotional pull. My heart remembers more vividly than my mind allows logic to assert itself. I started keeping a notepad. Every time a thought of her surfaces, I write it down. Every memory, every longing, every regret. I don't judge the content, I just let it exist on paper instead of letting it fester in my brain. Sometimes, the act of writing provides relief, a sense that I'm acknowledging the thought without letting it control me. Other times, it feels like I'm just feeding it, giving it permanence. My wife notices my occasional distraction. She's subtle, a gentle nudge, a question, a concerned look. And each time, my chest tightens. Because I love her. I respect her. I don't want her to ever feel inadequate or second to a memory. But how do you reconcile an obsession that exists entirely in your head without hurting the person who shares your present? I've begun analyzing my feelings. Why her? Why now? Why after 16 years does my brain insist on this mental loop? Perhaps it's nostalgia. Perhaps unresolved grief. Perhaps a longing for a version of youth that feels lost. But the guilt is constant. Every time I think of her, I feel as though I've betrayed my wife, as though I've allowed a ghost to trespass in the sanctuary of our marriage. Sometimes I lie awake and ask myself the hardest questions. Am I happy in my marriage? Do I feel trapped? Is this about her, or about what she represents? A freedom, a possibility, a life I might have had but didn't know how to claim. And every time, the answers come back with the same mix of certainty and doubt. I am happy. I am content. And yet, a fragment of my younger self still aches for something unresolved. I've begun to understand that obsession isn't about the person. It's about the unresolved feelings, the abrupt ending, the lack of closure, the what-ifs that never had a chance to resolve themselves. She's less a person now than a symbol, the unfinished story, the missing punctuation in a sentence my brain keeps trying to finish. I've tried confiding in a friend, someone removed from my life, someone neutral. I've tried speaking the words aloud. I keep thinking about someone from 16 years ago, and I feel guilty about it. Even saying it makes me flush with embarrassment. But the act of articulating it makes the memory feel smaller, less like a living thing in my brain and more like a contained problem I can analyze. I've realized that control is key. I cannot erase the memory, nor do I want to. I can, however, choose how I let it affect my life. I can choose not to dwell. Not to let it intrude on my interactions with my wife, not to allow it to color my present. I can acknowledge it without giving it power. Some nights, I even let myself imagine talking to her, not in reality, but in my mind. I imagine closure, an ending that never existed, words that never were said. And for a few minutes, the ache softens. It isn't perfect. It isn't real. But it is enough to remind me that I am not at the mercy of a ghost. I am an active participant in my own life. The hardest part remains the guilt. Even knowing that what I feel is natural doesn't erase it. Even rationalizing that memories do not diminish love doesn't make the pangs disappear. But I'm learning to sit with it, to accept it as a facet of being human, flawed, nostalgic, imperfect. I also realize that the obsession is fading slowly, imperceptibly, like a tide withdrawing. The intensity diminishes, though the memory remains. And that, I think, is the balance I need: acknowledgement without obsession, remembrance without intrusion, existence alongside the past without being consumed by it. Even now, the memory will surface unexpectedly, a fleeting smile in a movie, a lyric in a song, a fragment of a street scene that reminds me of her. But I no longer panic. I no longer feel helpless. I let the memory exist, and I return to my present, to the life I've built, to the woman I married. Slowly, I began to notice changes. Not sudden or dramatic, but subtle shifts in how I interacted with the world, with my wife, with myself. I stopped letting the memory dictate my moods. Instead of letting a random thought of her ruin a morning, I acknowledged it and let it pass, like a bird flying across the sky. Sometimes, I even smiled at the memory, not in longing, but in recognition that it was a part of my past that shaped me without controlling me. I started investing more energy into my marriage. Small gestures became deliberate, making coffee for my wife just the way she likes it, planning small weekend trips, laughing more, listening more attentively. I realized that by being fully present in my current life, I was reclaiming the space that the memory of her had occupied. I also began reflecting on why this had been so haunting. It wasn't really about her. It was about the suddenness of the ending, the lack of closure, the unfinished emotional narrative. And once I understood that, I could give myself the closure my younger self never had. I wrote letters I never sent, not to her, but to myself, acknowledging the pain, the longing, the confusion, and finally saying, "It's okay to let this go. Therapy helped too, even if I was mostly doing it internally." I examined my patterns of thought, my tendency to romanticize the past, my fear of fully confronting the ephemeral nature of relationships. Understanding the psychology behind my obsession didn't erase the emotions, but it made them manageable. One night, my wife asked me why I seemed lighter, happier, more present. I hesitated, but then I said, "I've been reflecting on the past and learning to live in the present." It was vague, but honest enough. And she smiled, squeezing my hand, unaware of the details. That moment felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of myself without exposing the fragile ghost that had haunted me for weeks. I noticed that the intrusive memories no longer had the same intensity. They still appeared, yes, but like shadows at dusk, visible, but harmless. I could think of her, acknowledge her, and then return to reality without panic or guilt. The memory became a quiet companion rather than a tyrant. I also allowed myself to think about the future, something I hadn't done while trapped in nostalgia. Not just career plans, but real, lived experiences with my wife. Trips we could take, meals we could share, new memories we could create together. Focusing on the future anchored me, tethering me to the present rather than letting me drift endlessly into the past. And slowly, I began to feel gratitude. Gratitude for my life, for my marriage, for the stability and love that surrounds me. The memory of her was no longer a source of pain, but a reminder of growth, of the impermanence of certain experiences, and of the importance of embracing what is real. I realized that obsession isn't inherently destructive. It only becomes destructive if you let it control you, if you let it overshadow your present and your responsibilities. By consciously reclaiming my attention, my thoughts, my life, I could let the memory exist without letting it dominate. I began small rituals of mindfulness, morning walks, journaling, breathing exercises. They didn't erase the past, but they helped me inhabit the present more fully. I started noticing the little things: my wife's laugh, the warmth of our home, the satisfaction of completing a work project and savoring them. And then one evening, I had a moment that felt like closure. I was cleaning out an old drawer and came across a faded photo from that time, nothing intimate, just a snapshot of a group of friends, including her. I held it, felt the rush of memory, and then placed it back and walked away. No longing, no panic, just acceptance. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Not the haunted version, not the guilt-ridden version, but the me who exists in the present, grateful for what I have, at peace with what I've lost. I remember the moment clearly. I was sitting on the couch one evening, a cup of tea in my hands, my wife beside me, and I realized that the memory of her, the girl from 16 years ago, no longer made my chest tighten. The obsessive thoughts had lost their edge. The ache had softened. The ghost had faded from tyrant to visitor. It wasn't magic or sudden clarity. It was gradual, a series of small, intentional choices to inhabit my present rather than dwell in a past that never was. Writing, reflecting, journaling, mindfulness, attentive love for my wife, all of it slowly built walls around obsession. Not to erase it, but to contain it. I thought about the what-ifs one last time, and for the first time, I could observe them without longing or guilt. I saw them as hypothetical timelines that never existed, like clouds drifting in an expansive sky. They were part of my history, but they did not define my present or dictate my future. That night, I spoke to my wife about reflection and memory in general, keeping my language abstract but honest. She smiled, and I felt a surge of gratitude. The fact that I could share a glimpse of my inner world without dragging her into the unresolved past felt like a victory, a reclaiming of trust, of intimacy, and of stability. I no longer fear the appearance of the memory. When it surfaces, I allow it to exist, acknowledge it, and return to my life. It has become a quiet companion, a reminder of how fragile and unpredictable memory is, how it shapes us, but need not control us. I've started dreaming again, not about her, but about possibilities with my wife, about life we are building together. The contrast is stark. What once drew me back into obsessive nostalgia now strengthens my focus on what is real, tangible, and present. Sometimes, when I look back, I almost smile at my younger self, the one who spiraled, who felt heartbreak so intensely over a brief month of love. That person was raw, unrefined, but capable of immense feeling. I've grown from that person. I've learned that memory is a teacher, not a jailer, and most importantly, I've learned forgiveness, not toward her or even toward the past, but toward myself. Forgiveness for allowing the obsession to take hold. Forgiveness for feeling guilty about what was inevitable and uncontrollable. Forgiveness for the imperfect, human mind that sometimes refuses to let go. Now, when I lie in bed beside my wife, listening to her breath, I feel fully present. I feel gratitude, love, and a sense of continuity. The past is there, as it always will be, but it no longer pulls at me. It is a quiet thread woven into a tapestry that I am actively creating every day. I am at peace. Not perfect peace, that does not exist, but a steady, grounded, profound kind of acceptance that allows me to live fully in the present, love openly, and move forward without fear of ghosts or regrets. I don't think about her the same way anymore. I think about the lessons, the growth, the resilience she indirectly inspired. And when I do think about her, I smile gently, briefly, and then I return to my life. Because this life, right here, with the person I chose to spend it with, is enough.